Wait for it. Wait for it. And we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, you may have noticed we've got yet again no Stabby, the chaos coordinator, and no Nick. Apparently, the Border Patrol people don't know how to do math because they've got him working, by my calculation, more hours a week than there are hours in the week. So I'm thinking maybe they figured out time travel or something. But as either way, his work is keeping him away. But he has missed chatting with all of you, dear listener. He still is around on the social medias if you want to reach out to him. But podcasting, it's kind of hard to do from the middle of a boat in the bay out in California.
He's just not trying hard enough. If he tried harder, he could totally podcast from the ocean.
Well, he did show me a picture of some of the drugs they seized. So, maybe he could turn like all MacGyver-like. He could turn those drugs into a extender for signal or something. I don't know.
I'll see exactly. And little wires and a big rabbit antenna. And
you got to know where the
I'm just saying, if he really wanted to be here, he'd be here with us.
If he could make friends with a dolphin, he could have them run wires for him.
That's right.
Perfect.
And MacGyver always had the bubblegum wrapper and the paper clip too. Can't forget those.
Exactly.
He's the reason I had a mullet in the 80s. I'm just saying. Maybe I shouldn't just say I don't know. But it was cool, people. It was the 80s. All right. Don't hate us. All right. So the next part of this introduction, we got, as usual, guest host Jana, who sometimes cosplays as Jena Rey for her pen name, but she's filling in for us today because I thought, it would be fun to have her because she writes the fantasies. So she also knows the kind of things Sharon knows. So she's helping me out a little bit. Until recently, I was almost exclusively into the sci-fi, Sharon.
Okay, and you don't see them as mixable?
No, when I was growing up, they were very distinct things. One was space, one was fake. Although space sci-fi, some of that's fake. I mean, space dragons. So I don't know. I've heard the argument of people that consider them all the same. And that is actually going to be a discussion for a future panel that we're going to have. Okay. I just need to find people that are opinionated enough on the topic to make it lively.
I'm opinionated.
Well, that's good
yes.
to know.
Yes, and invite Sharon, and I want to be there, whether I'm discussing or whether I'm holding up signs for who gets how many points, because it's a delightful discussion.
Yes,
you're going to knit in solidarity.
Darn straight.
All right.
And by the way, I have a sign up there on my wall that says, "I am the chaos coordinator."
Oh, I like it. I approve. See, they were right to send you to us. Absolutely. All right. So, Sharon, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home?
I am Sharon Lee. I am the creator and co-author of the Liaden Universe novels, mostly. They are space opera novels, and the 27th in that series just came out in April. The first came out in February of 1988, so we've been doing this a while. And I say space opera because that way I get science fiction, fantasy, romance, mystery, Western, whatever I want.
You get to do all the things.
All of the things, yes. I love space opera. It's a wonderful, wonderful field.
It is, and it can pretty much do everything and anything. There's really no limit to what can be a space opera, as long as space is involved.
That's not entirely true.
Well, I give you Hellspark, Janet Kagan's Hellspark, which is a space opera in which space is kind of in the way. There are spaceships. She has to go from one planet to another planet, but basically it's a murder mystery.
Yeah,
with linguistics.
Nice. I don't think I've heard of this one. I'll have to check.
You have to read Hellspark. You must.
I'm writing it down, adding it to the TBR. See, that's the danger of podcasting for interviewing authors. Is my list keeps growing. I also was concerned at one point in time that we'd run out of topics to talk about, and every episode it doubles. My list.
Authors?
On season 1 of the Blasters and Blades, I was like, I got 2 pages, and then we're going to be in trouble. Now my list is 27 pages of ideas, and we keep adding to it. Mm-hmm. It gets kind of scary, but okay. So before we get started, we do have to ask you the religion questions. It's kind of a tradition here. Are you ready for this, Sharon?
I am.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek or Firefly?
Classic Trek.
Okay. What is it about Trek that appeals to you?
Oh my goodness, there was nothing like it. I'm old. There was nothing like it. There was a crew, not just a lonely man, a lonely hero doing his thing like we had. I go way back in science fiction books too, where a novel was 50,000 words maybe. It was a whole crew. It was a diverse crew. They all worked together. They knew each other. It was, found family in space. It was terrific. And then they had adventures.
Cool.
I agree. That is my husband's very, very favorite is original. And I came in just a few years behind that. And so I was kind of bridging the gap between original and next generation. And then I really went back and watched the original, and they really do win. That combination and the way the storytelling happens, the special effects are hokey. The storytelling is fantastic.
No, the storytelling is wonderful. So classic Trek, yes.
I have heard people talk about how it had shorter run because it only got a few seasons, and every time they tell me that, I remind them that seasons were a lot longer back then.
Yes.
It wasn't 13 episodes and done. I think some of the seasons were 50 episodes, I think.
It was you only had 2 months, I think, of reruns and stuff, and then you started again. Things would get scrambled up as during time. If you had Saturday at 9 o'clock, you might be, on Friday at 10 o'clock. But seasons went on forever. I look at seasons now and it's like 4 episodes. That's a season. I'm like, what?
So there were 30 episodes. It looks like a quick Google search, 30 episodes per season. So it's twice as long as most right now. And it looks like a total of 79 Jana found for us. She's the Google queen right now.
Woohoo! And Stabby's not here.
Yeah. So did you watch from the beginning, or did you come into it late and then watch it later?
So the very first one.
So did you have a preference between Captain Pike, which was in the first few episodes in the black and white, and those uniforms, or do you like Kirk better?
No, I think nobody likes Kirk. I was in it for I was in it for the science officer and for Mr. Sulu and for Uhura. The captain was the captain. The other guys liked him, so I put up with him.
I love that. I liked the uniform in the first few episodes before they went to the leotard. But obviously, it looks hokey now, but some of the costuming decisions back then were based on taking into account limitations of the technology. Mm-hmm. You see some of the old black and white movies where once they tried to add color and you're watching it in 4K, it's like, oh, you can see the string holding the spaceship as it drags across the screen.
Yes,
but
let's not do that.
Sometimes I think some of the older episodes are better before they remastered them.
Some things were meant to be in black and white. Before the world, you're a Calvin and Hobbes fan, of course.
Oh yes, before the world became color.
Before the world became color, when his dad is a wonderful person always.
Amazing.
All right, and because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, the Chronicles of Narnia, or I forgot my own question, or the Wheel of Time. I blame Stabby because she's not here.
Okay, so it's Game of Thrones, Narnia, and something we forgot.
The Wheel of Time.
Oh, Wheel of Time. Good heavens. Murderbot.
Oh, good choice.
Tell us about this Murderbot. I have not heard of it.
You have not heard of Murderbot. Murderbot is the creation of Martha Wells, who has written much science fiction, fantasy, and mixed up science fiction and fantasy. Murderbot is the hero of the piece, I suppose. He is a sec unit. He's mechanical and cloned material, and he is, in his own words, created to protect humanity, and humanity are idiots. And he's managed to, before the story even starts, so I'm not spoiling anything, has managed to hack his governor unit, which keeps him, quote unquote, in line. And instead of going on a killing rampage, as you would expect for somebody named Murderbot, He has downloaded hundreds of hours of space opera, and is particularly fond of watching a show called The Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon. And he's a wonderfully engaging character, and he is just now coming to Apple at the end of May, I think, to Apple TV. So I'm meeting your criteria here. Audiobooks and print. I'm not sure about graphic.
I'll have to check it out. I subscribed for a month to the Apple just so I could watch the Godzilla versus King Kong or whatever that one was, Monarch. Mm-hmm. But it was too difficult to get it to watch on my screen. So when I watch my TV, I like to be able to kick my feet up. So sitting at my desk for that is just not as enjoyable. But Monarch was worth it. I might have to go back. I also like the Masters of the Air. I think the World War II bomber pilot story that they did. Oh. It's based on a book, and it's basically telling the story of the air war over Europe, which was surprisingly interesting. I was in the infantry myself, and so you kind of get we're better than everyone else, and we're doing the real fighting vibes is kind of part of the esprit de corps. So to see what those guys were going through, and like they're huge, like you were more likely to survive as a grunt than you were sometimes with those bomber guys.
Yeah, the bombardiers. It was. My grandfather was a World War II bombardier, still with us at 102, and that was his crew. So when Rosenbaum goes down late in the show, Madsen is just off of his left wing, and they watched the thing go down and got hit by the fireball, and he says it's the only time he was ever warm in the airplane was for those 3 seconds as they got hit, because they were in all of the suits and everything else, and they had electrical cords that they could plug into the plane, but he was the mechanic, and so he says, I never sat anywhere long enough to plug into the plane and get warm. I'd sit down, plug in for a second, and then somebody would scream that something else was on fire, and I had to go take care of it. So he just ran around and never did get to plug in and use his electric blanket kind of suit. But it's an amazing series that they did with that. But yeah, that was
this
his
is Masters of the Air.
Masters of the Air. Mm-hmm.
Now, see, I'll have to look for that.
Yeah, it was really,
I
really
heard
great.
Stories about World War II from the infantry perspective. My grandfather landed on D-Day and was finally wounded at St. Lo, at the Battle of St. Lo. So his war was somewhat muted. But then he met my grandfather at the aid station because she was one of the nurses. So I guess it was love at first stitch. I don't know.
Well, it happens.
Yeah, and then they made an honest woman of each other, or honest person of each other, I guess, since he's not a woman. But you know what I meant. Tomato, tomato. But yeah, it was definitely interesting, like to see from the other perspective. And then, of course, you also often hear of World War II from the viewpoint of the tankers and the infantry, not so much, or the Navy. You don't tend to get as much focus on the air power stuff. So it was just fascinating to kind of see that aspect of it and how much that had changed from the last war, not 40 years earlier. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a big deal when the first airplane said, I bet we could drop a grenade out and maybe do some damage. Like, no, that's dishonorable. How could you do that?
How could you do that on people's heads? They're not being able to defend themselves from things falling from the sky.
And I've been the World War II, or excuse me, the World War I air power thing I was always fast. There was a movie called Bigelow. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about a guy that time travels somehow because reasons back into World War I, and he can go back and forth, and he ends up joining the Lafayette Escadrille. It's French, and I'm butchering it, but it's the Americans that fought in the
fought in France. Right.
Yeah, fought for the French Air Force before America entered. It's just fascinating, and of course they cover the Red Baron because why wouldn't you? Which I learned about because I watched Snoopy, so I knew about the Red Baron.
Of course.
So I learned a lot about the classics from my cartoon years.
And I learned about classical music from my cartoon years. It's amazing how much classical music they used in cartoons.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
So, all right. And because one of the crying shames of adulthood is we stop asking each other the important questions. I know it's a horrible segue, but we're just going to roll with it. But one of the crying shames is we don't ask those important questions. So we are, thanks to our sponsors, bringing that back. And we're going to ask you, Madam Lee, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Well, I have 3 favorite dinosaurs.
As one does.
My first one is back in the early 1980s, there was a movie called War Games.
Yes.
Matthew Broderick. Broderick, and he goes to find his buddy, the scientist, on this island, and he's dive bombed by a pterodactyl. And the scientist is running down the beach, going, "I said it would never fly." And I'm like, yeah. So pterodactyl for that, and from elementary school, the Hadrosaurus, because I loved ducks when I was a kid, and I thought the T-Rex and the Brontosaurus were getting way too much press. I really liked the duckbills. And my third one was I'm from Baltimore, which is sits on the skirts of Washington, D.C., and went to the Smithsonian Institute a lot when I was a kid. And my parents' idea of a really good time was to take us to the museum in Washington. And when you walked into the Museum of Natural History, the very, very first thing you saw was a woolly mammoth.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So those are my three.
I see nothing wrong with museums as a cool place to visit.
Oh, no, it was great. We were very fortunate.
I wish it was, gas wasn't so expensive so I could do it more often. Because I'm about 4 hours south of DC.
Okay, you're down in Virginia?
Yeah, Southern Virginia, in the Hampton Roads area. And so, yeah, the woolly mammoth, I always found that fascinating. They found some of the woolly mammoths that were intact enough in Siberia that they got the full DNA sequence, and they're trying to clone them and bring them back.
Where are we going to put them? Everything's heating up.
See? We've written stories about what happens when you bring things back, and very rarely does it turn out well.
But we're going to do it anyway, because what's
Of course, we can.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like they wrote a bunch of books and movies, and I don't know if this was in the movie or the book, but the line, they spent so much time asking whether they could, they forgot to ask whether they should.
Whether they should, yes.
Yeah, I can resonate with that, because they recently, they've talked about the woolly mammoth thing for years. We've been making, in the not too distant future, a lot of progress on sequencing the genomes, so they're able to do more than they thought they were. And so they cloned the dire wolf. So now they said it's a cloned dire wolf. It's really a dire wolf hybrid with whatever wolf they bred it with.
Yeah.
So we're starting to do all of that stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? Yeah.
Did they not watch the movies? I mean, really?
So
no, they never do.
I grew up on the East Coast, and I've got an aunt that lives in Florida. And one of the problems there is some of these Everglade snakes that people have as pets, and then they just throw into the swamps when they don't want them anymore. And now you've got invasive species that don't have natural predators, and they're causing havoc. And I'm just imagining, what happens when you would introduce some of these apex predators from years gone by, and how that could possibly ruin everything.
Easily. That's how. Easily.
Oh, cat sighting.
Hi, Trooper.
Oh,
this is Trooper. He's my old man. He's 15, and he's a little ninja.
What a beautiful boy.
All right, and the last and most important question that's near and dear to my heart, because I'm a caffeine addict, is we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. We are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. So, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
I used to mainline coffee, and then there's a secret thing that they don't tell you when you're young. If you mainline coffee when you're young, when you get old, you can't drink coffee anymore. So the thing that I mainline now is Irish breakfast tea.
Okay.
It still gives me caffeine, but without the oils and other stuff from coffee.
Okay. For the breakfast tea, do you drink that plain, or do you put cream and sugar? How do you take your tea?
Plain. I drank my coffee black. I drink my tea black.
Okay. So for your tea, do you do the pressed bags like Lipton's does? Do you do the loose leaf tea, or do you do the sort of hybrid, which is loose leaf in a mesh bag?
The sachets. Mostly I drink Harney's, so that would be in a tea bag.
Okay. The modern tea bags aren't the ones I grew up with, where it's like they pressed so much they basically pressed the joy out of the tea.
Oh no, tea.
Yeah, the new ones though, they're basically loose leaf in a container. It's just easier to use. So, although that Lipton's tea gave me many a diabetic comas from the Southern iced tea that I drank growing up.
Sweet tea, yes.
Yes.
I remember sweet tea, and I was only in a border state.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when I was going to grad school in Philly, we actually, with some of the other grad students that were history majors and from the South, we would go to the Hooters, not because we like their wings, they're subpar. It's the only place in the Philadelphia area that had sweet tea, because the chain Hooters originated in Atlanta. So every one of them has the same menu. Even if they only make enough to say, I have a cup of sweet tea, they have to have some on hand. And when they saw us, they're like, okay, we're going to make some more.
Nice.
Making a gallon right now.
We can tell.
But
You're
we were
those
the only
people.
ones that drank it in the whole area. Like, and of course, I'm sure they thought we were pretentious because we're grad students, and most grad students are pretentious. It's kind of required, I would think. So, all right. Well, now that we got the religion questions out of the way, let's talk about you, which is the reason we brought you here. So, how did you get into enjoying speculative fiction? I'm assuming it was probably books for you if your parents were museum goers.
Well, I didn't, just stop me if this sounds at all familiar. I was a funny looking kid. I didn't talk very well. I had a speech impediment. So I read really early. And at that point in time, back in the past when we all lived under rocks, you couldn't do what you can do now. You can not only now just read science fiction and have enough to read, you can just read your kind of science fiction and have enough to read. In order to feed my habit, I had to read science fiction, nurse books, mysteries, true life. I just had to read anything that came in new. And, at 15 cents a pop, that got to be really expensive when you went down to the newsroom, to the newsstand. But basically, it came down to, I read nurse books, which do either of you remember nurse books?
I do.
Okay, great. Then a nurse book is the nurse saves the hero's life and they fall in love. That's
okay.
Yes.
right there. Okay.
It was its own little romance niche, and they're delightful. They're very cute.
They were cute. And
Medical
then you
romance
had
is it? Medical romance is what they would call it now.
medical romance. Not too much.
Not as sexy sounding as nurse books.
No, nurse books. So I read nurse books, and they were cute. They were fun. They had, a happy ending, and they had some kind of connection between people. And then I would read science fiction books. And science fiction books at that point in time were basically the lone hero who came in and had an adventure. And even if he had a crew, he left his crew and went off to be, lone and heroic again. And what I decided very early on was that nurse books needed more adventure and adventure books needed more nurses. And basically that's what we write.
I love it.
In the Liaden Universe, we write stories about people. And because of having to have an eclectic background of also needing to read, if you read a lot, mysteries and westerns and other romances besides nurse books, that gave us the canvas for the scope that the Liaden Universe has, where we can write a murder mystery for this one, and a straight up romance for that one, and in Ocean's 11 for this one, and just have fun.
Yeah, that's one of the things. So when I grew up, they definitely had, at the libraries. I'm a child of the 80s. So they definitely had speculative fiction was split within sci-fi and fantasy. And I just added that to the list, by the way, Jana. The panel do the subgenres of spec fic matter.
Yay!
We're adding that to the summer episodes. And so but there would be times where you'd read all the books they had in that category, and you could only interlibrary loan so many at a time, because they were, generally speaking, you were limited to what the city had in their catalog. And so I would read the fantasy novels, and I would read the history novels, the historical fiction, the even the Louis L'Amour Western novels, which I absolutely adore. And I don't think
those are like nurse novels. Everything, they were cute. They worked. They were short.
Yep,
They were
all
charming.
comes together. Good characters.
Childhood me would be very disappointed in adult me, because I never did learn to ride a horse or rope a steer. But it sounded cool when he said it. Of course, obviously you got Zorro too. I don't think people get the being wide read anymore. They, like you said, they focus very narrowly on their, not just their subgenre, but the niche within it. I don't know. I think something about reading a little bit of everything opens your eyes.
I'm trying to think. My library, and again, Baltimore, I had the Enoch Pratt and the Baltimore County Library, so both very vast collections. And the mystery section was huge. The women's section was huge. The science fiction section was like this. They didn't.
She's pantomiming not very big to your listeners if you're audio only.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm taking ASL, so I'm talking with my hands again. It was like 2 shelves long and 4 shelves deep. It was nothing. And there were more Perry Mason books in the library's collection than there were science fiction books total.
Wow. So I'm a bad mystery reader because I don't like not knowing. I generally will jump to the end and then reread the whole thing. So I'm probably every fan of mystery I've ever met gives me that look when I say that. Like, how could you? But that's the one I have a lot of trouble with because it's the uncertainty. And of course, it's always whoever you thought ruled out was always the guy. It's kind of always the way it goes. So do you write mysteries too in this universe that you do?
All stories are mysteries.
You would hate me then.
That's another one to add.
I would read the end first. I'm that kind of guy.
I don't care as long as you buy my book and read it. That's fine.
So did you have, Jana, did you have a lot of library options? I don't know like how robust the library system is in Utah.
Well, see, it depends on where you are, because I grew up in a town that when I was born, there was less than 10,000 of us in the town. So we started really bitty, and it was a big deal when the first traffic light went in. One of those kinds of little towns. That whole roping steers and that kind of stuff, that's my youth. That's how I grew up, was working on a farm and cowboys and everything else. So our first little library was awful as far as like you say, when you're talking about how big the science fiction section is. Yeah, science fiction and fantasy together is just this much, and it was worse if you were in the kids section. And so I started drifting over to the adult section, and then I had to get my mother's permission. So she had to tell them to let me check out all of these books, which always turned out funny. And then it got bigger kind of as things went. Once you get out of that into some of the bigger cities, very, very robust libraries. Where I went to school at BYU, ginormous, phenomenal library there. And because a lot of BYU students have gone on to be big in science fiction and fantasy, the science fiction and fantasy section in that library was very satisfying. I miss that library. And then I married a man who loves sci-fi and fantasy as much as I do. So we combined our libraries when we got married. And I think at last count, we're up to like 4,200 books that are stashed in various places in the house. And when we die, it's the kids' problem. And so we don't hesitate to buy more, because it's not our problem in the long run. We're never moving out of this house. So they'll just stay here until our sons have to deal with it. It'd be great. But yes, it's great fun. And I agree, the widely read thing, it makes such a huge difference whether you're a reader or a writer. It just brings all those bits into it.
And they'll never have to suffer like we did, hunched under a blanket with a flashlight trying to read at night when we think our parents didn't know. Newsflash, they knew that we were reading at night, and now they've got like the backlit screen stuff, so they don't have to sweat their whatever off under a blanket trying to hide with the little flashlight. Like, they'll never know.
No, my kids are still doomed that way, because we don't allow electronic devices in their bedrooms at night.
Okay.
Because, these are kids. If my sons had those, they would just stay up all night, and my daughter too. So they have real books with real flashlights under real covers. We are sharing that particular thing, because there is something really nostalgic about an honest-to-goodness book with paper in it, where you can sit down. I mean, you said your first publication was 88, and, that's when I was older than I want to admit. But, going through that and really digging in, and mostly what we had was those cute little mass market paperbacks, because we were all poor. And so you couldn't afford the hardbacks. That was something for the library. But I remember buying a lot of my first science fiction fantasy in those little paperbacks and sitting out reading them in various places. And those are great memories that I think we should be giving to our kids.
There you go. And I remember batteries used to be, we bought our batteries from Sunny Surplus, and they were really cheap, lousy batteries. And my father kept saying to me, how come you use up so many batteries?
And did you have the big chunky flashlight? So it wasn't even double A's.
Yeah.
It was C's and D's that went in that giant flashlight with the big head you screwed on.
It weighed a ton, and there
But it
wasn't
doubled
really a
as a
good
home-
way to get the beam in. I'm sorry, what?
It also doubled as a home defense device, though.
Right, yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you could kill somebody with one of those things. And they made the best lightsaber wars as you got a little bit older and
Oh, yeah.
the whole thing. Because you got a pretty decent beam off of those, and they were hefty. And yeah, there may have been some pretend lightsaber fights with those giant things. Because why not, man?
Why not? You've got it.
Yeah, I was a kid who always got in trouble reading in class when we should have been doing whatever, because I'd already read chapters ahead. So I'm like, let me read what I want now. So I was the kid hiding books behind the textbooks in elementary school. Yeah,
my husband used to get notes sent home. Stephen has been reading in class again. And his mother would go, and?
I got those and talking out of turn. They might or might not have called me motor mouth as a kid. I know you're shocked, Jana. Shocked and confused.
I'm gonna get the papers. Oh my goodness. Talking in class.
So was there anything you didn't like reading when you were younger, Sharon? Were there any of the books that you read just because it was there that weren't necessarily your cup of tea?
I would actively turn down the horror book.
Okay.
I don't like being scared.
Now,
real life is scary enough.
Do you differentiate horror from like psychological thrillers, which some people would call horror?
I'm feeling backward. I don't tend to gravitate now towards psychology. I'm like you. With mysteries. If I get a book that's like really scary, and we don't know which one is the bad, I'll flip to the back to see who dies first. But I don't gravitate toward anything that's trading on fear.
Okay. So my problem with horror is it has the too stupid to live characters, generally speaking.
Yeah, that's an awful thing in any book.
Like I grew up in a military town and on the East Coast where hurricanes were a thing. So preparedness was just, I remember vividly as a kid having no power for 2 weeks, and we were, cooking on the grill on the camping Coleman stove and canoeing down the street because we flooded. And so the idea, like these people being unable to, at a bare minimum, do that, like in order for those plot lines to work most of the time, you just have to have morons as characters. So yeah, I can feel you there. I don't really like any of it either. We tolerate it on the podcast because my co-hosts love that stuff. And I go along for the ride because they put up with what I like. So it's copacetic. But we're going to pause for a moment, and we're going to shamelessly shill for the man and the woman today. And then we're going to get back. We're going to talk about your book, The Ribbon Dance. And thank you for sponsoring this episode, Jana. I know I volunteered.
The necromantic magic of the Great Lich has held sway over the world for 100 years. Can a young knight of the god of death and the last priestess of the goddess of life destroy him before their homeland falls? The only survivor of his convoy, journeyman knight Darian, is entrusted with an ancient scroll and one mission. Return the scroll to the High Temple in Hothan, no matter the cost. He never expected that journey to include stumbling onto the last healer in the world. Now he must take not only the scroll but the woman across the kingdom to safety, each step dogged by the relentless undead. Death's Knight, Book 1 in the completed War of the Lich series by Matthew T. Summers and Jena Rey.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. So as we transition into talking about your books, how did you get into writing? Because this sounds like this might have been one of the first things you wrote, right? This universe?
I mentioned earlier that I had speech impediment. And I got into writing because when you write something down, the words all stay in the right order. They don't mix around.
Yes, ma'am.
And I thought that was a feature. So I began to prefer writing to speaking, and that's to this day. Um, and I got into writing stories like many people get into writing stories. I was reading something and I hit either a too stupid to live or this makes no sense. The book went across the room and I uttered the fateful words, I can do better than that.
Ta-da! I love it.
And the first public thing I wrote, I never disregard spite as a motivation. I was dating a guy down in Baltimore, and he had a best friend who I didn't like. And Balticon was having a short story contest. And for the short story contest, if you won the short story contest, you would get a membership at Balticon, $25, and you would get to meet the guest of honor, who that year was Isaac Asimov. And this guy that I didn't like said, I am going to win the short story contest. And I said, like hell you are. So I wrote a short story and submitted it, and I won the contest.
Fantastic.
So that was the first step on the road down. And I wrote very short stories for a little while. I met a guy named Steve Miller who was already a published writer and was a reporter and a reviewer and a librarian, done all kinds of things. And we hit it off, moved in together, and we started to write together. And I told him about this made-up world that I had been basically telling myself stories in for most of my life. And he said, well, tell me about your characters. Tell me what they do. Tell me what, and Valcon and Mary, who had been with me forever. And I explained, and the green people, and I explained about them too. And he said, wow, that's really interesting. Have you ever thought about writing that down? And I went, of all the things I've been trying to write, no, I never thought of writing that down. And Steve used to run chess tournaments on the weekends. We were young and broke, and he would run chess tournaments and bring home the money and a bottle of wine. And one weekend he was away at a chess tournament, and I sat down and at my typewriter, and was typing, and I would type something and throw it away and type something. And by the time he came home, I had a trash can and most of a room full of crumbled up paper and one piece of paper. And he said, what have you been doing all day? And I said, I think I have a novel. And I showed him this piece of paper, one line on it. The line was, the man who was not Terence O'Grady had come quietly. And I said, I think it's a novel. I really think it's a novel. And he said, no, I think it's a series.
Oh,
and we sat down with the bottle of wine and we plotted out 7 books. But we were pikers. We're up to 27.
Okay, so that leads me to a question because it's one that we get a lot, both as, as authors and others. So is it 27 where we need to start at 1 and read the? I've actually read the first one. I had forgotten. You have to forgive me because I too am getting older than I used to be. And so I looked it up and I went, wait, I've read this one. And it's really, really good. So listening audience, it's really, really good. Go buy the first one. But that leads to the question of, since we're talking about ribbon dance, can they start anywhere, or do we really need to start with number 1 and carry through?
No. We realized after we passed the 7th one that people were going to need gateways into this thing. And nobody's going to start all the way back at number 1 just to catch up on the new book. So there are several gateway books. One of them is Agent of Change. The other one's Conflict of Honors. Necessity's Child. If we're talking about ribbon dance, then that's an internal trilogy. The trilogy starts with Traitor's Leap, Ribbon Dance, and Diviner's Bow. So that's just 3 books, and they're all recent.
So I just did a quick look because we talked with Bain in that partnership to your listener that we mentioned back in early May when you heard the episode with Griffin Barber. Bain Library does have a lot of books in there that are starters to their longer series, the Bain Free Library, that are free. Agent of Change, the first book in this long series, is one of the free ones. So I will link that in the show notes.
Okay, so is Fledgling, I think, which is another door in.
I love that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
so clever to have those various places we can get in on, because I'm one of those that, like you say, trying to say I'm going to commit to 27 books so that I can get them all.
It's
That's
impossible.
so much harder than I love committing to small arcs.
Mm-hmm. So you can commit to, an internal trilogy. If you like Regency romances, Local Custom, Scout's Progress, and Mouse and Dragon is a Regency arc. Two brothers alike in station and different in temperament and how they find their wives.
Oh,
You can't get
awesome.
any more Regency.
So I actually at one point in time did read a bunch of romance because I thought it would help me understand women. Plot twist, it did not. But yeah, so I've read a few of the romance, what do you call them, bodice rippers, I guess, back in the day. Regency was definitely a unique fill. I think something about those books made a lot of Americans get obsessed with the monarchy and the nobility stuff overseas, which always amuses me. I think sometimes they care more about the royals than the British citizens do.
Well, that could be true.
So
different cultures, yeah. But no, the Regencies, what appealed to me about the Regencies, which marries very well with space opera, is the manners and the protocol. You have to bow to this lady. If a woman walks into a room and you're a man, you stand up. You don't sit down before the lady sits down. All of these rules. And all of the people know the rules, and we all go by the rules, even if we think the rules are silly, and that makes things run smoothly.
I grew up in a military town in the South. Those rules were still around in the 80s. Someone forgot to tell them that they were out of fashion. So was your first, I don't know when Bain was founded. Was this first series first with a different publisher then?
Oh, the first book went to Del Rey Books.
Del Rey.
Okay.
And it was a paperback original, which was what Del Rey was doing at that point. And Del Rey was also doing something called 3 books and you're out, unless you break through. And so we did Agent of Change, Conflict of Honors, and Carpe Diem, and we were out. They did this to a lot of writers, and this was pre-internet, so we never got to talk to each other. They killed a lot of careers that probably should have continued with the 3 and out. We were lucky. Back in before the rocks cooled, we actually got the rights to our books back.
Wow.
Which is something that hardly ever happens anymore. They just cling to them out of spite. But we got the rights to the first 3 books back. About the time a guy called us on the telephone and said, "Hi, my name is Steve Pagel, and I have started a publishing house called Misha Merlin, and I have read your first 3 novels, and they're charming, and I want to reprint them. Are the rights available?" And we said, "Yes, the rights are available. We just got the rights to Carpe Diem back like 2 weeks ago. But you have to understand that there are 5 more books." And then he said something that people never say. He said, "I'll take them."
Oh, wow.
So we sold 7 books out just under one contract. And for, I have to count, I think we did 10 books with Misha Merlin before Misha Merlin went out of business. And then Bain resurrected. So our career died twice. Bain resurrected us the 3rd time.
So a good thing you played by baseball rules because, you still had an at bat.
Right. And we never stopped writing. I mean, people just stopped buying our stuff.
Yeah, that's the other thing is that's why some of the authors had so many pen names back in the day because even if they would publish you, they would only publish X number of novels a year by you. So, and if you wanted to eat and make writing the full-time job, they were a lot of people with multiple pen names.
Mostly multiple pen names was because of the magazines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, you made your living out of magazines back in the olden days. That was before me. And the advice we got from Roger Zelazny, who was of that previous generation, was that how you make your writing career was that you made a name for yourself in the magazines, and then you pitched your novel to one of the editors, because we were all fans. I mean, science fiction was a very, very small field at that point, and everybody knew everybody else. So after you made your name in the magazines and the editors knew you could write, then you pitched your novel, and then you kind of graduated to doing novels. That wasn't how it worked by the time we got on the scene. And when we submitted our first novel, we submitted it as by Lee Miller, because we didn't want anybody to say it took two of you to write this. And the Del Rey editor said, we don't do, Judy Lynn Del Rey does not do pseudonyms. So whose name do you want first? And Steve said, we want it by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller because it's Sharon's Universe. And when the book came out, it was by Steve Miller and Sharon Lee because Guy first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those were the times. And one of the things Steve Pagel did for us was he put my name first on our work.
That was nice.
Yes.
So that's how the universe started. Now let's talk about, and I'm going to throw the cover up, the ribbon dance specifically.
That's a great cover.
It is. I'm going to zoom in.
It's a beautiful cover.
But how did you get the idea for this part of the arc?
How much peanut butter do you like on your chocolate?
All, yes.
Oh, yes. There's an unfortunate tendency among some science fiction readers to call psychic powers, which were science fiction and even science when I was back in the day, magic. It's not magic. There has always been a thread of psychic and paranormal powers in the Liaden universe. People are farseers. People can teleport, and teleporting not so much, but read minds. We have healers who are interactive empaths. Who, if you're troubled, they can kind of, with your permission, reach into your head and try to make you less troubled. Try to fix what's bothering you so that you're happier and more productive. And with Trader's Leap, the book directly before Ribbon Dance, we have a person named Patty O'Scallon. And Patty has been through some bad times, and her father is a healer. And she started to manifest a talent when things were really bad, and she said, no, I can't do this now, and she shut her talent away. And Trader's Leap is partially the story of Patty coming to terms with the fact that she actually has a talent. And they raised this planet called Colomino, which has an active ambient, which allows people who have a little talent to have a bigger talent. You can actually use your talent to your full potential. And it's in this very strange world that Patty actually comes into herself. And one of the defining features of Colomino and this active ambient are the ribbons. You can see the ribbons dancing in the air, all all up there, and the ribbons rise and the ribbons fade, and on a night when the ribbons are strongest, everybody who lives out of the city has a ribbon dance. And one of the things you can do is you can levitate, because the ribbons assist you in that. And that's where the idea for that is. And boy, didn't he do a great cover.
So is the ribbon sort of a stand-in for the psychic powers that naturally flow?
On Colomino, there are three kinds of people. There are the civilized. They live in the city, basically under a grid. And if you live in the city under the grid, it's like living in Baltimore City in the 70s. The sky was red. You couldn't see the stars. Okay, so if you live under the grid, you can't see the ribbons. The people who live out from the grid and directly communicate with the ambient see this glorious sky and feel its influence. They're considered to be, the people who live off grid, the Hayosa, are considered by the civilized people to be a little flighty. They're always playing, and they're always eating. And the reason they're always eating is because exercising their psychic powers uses energy.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to replenish their energy. There's a thing in Ribbon Dance where Patty complains. Patty's a trader, and her father's a trader, and they're there to open Colomino to trade. And Patty says, at one point to her father, she says, there are entirely too many pretty little cakes in this enterprise. And the cakes are a gag for about half the book, and then they're not a gag. You find out why they're actually, it's very important to always have cake. Always offer cake. People offer you cake. Please have cake. Nobody wants an incident.
So, I've started I'm not really much, I don't care about trigger warnings. I'm pretty unflappable. But when it comes to people that write really well food scenes, like I want a warning about that because I'm on a diet and I need to know, like, can I read this book when I'm hungry?
Killjoy.
Is this one of those books where I'm like, maybe right after I finished eating, I should read this one?
Probably, because it really is. If you expend the energy, you have to replenish it, and you have to do it now.
Okay. So, for those that are, have kids that read, what would you say the age range for this novel is? You could use the movie rating if that's easier. How would you rate this for appropriateness?
12 or 13, and a good reader, you should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, I'm kind of guessing it's about the same content level as the earlier books that I have read, and I'd easily give those to my kids.
Mm-hmm. We don't do a lot of
and above.
Explicit anything.
Now the guy on the cover gives me Doctor Who vibes. So is that intentional, or just that am I reading too much into it?
No, it's you're reading too much into it.
Okay, that's always possible.
Yeah, David Mattingly, who did this beautiful cover, often asks us for pictures or movie stars or who he can base a character on. And I had found somewhere a wonderful, wonderful picture, a daguerreotype of a guy in his Civil War clothes going off to war. And that's that guy. I said, you want to know who it is? It's this guy right here. That's cool. Who I took it off of.
Oh, I love that.
That is amazing. Now, given that this is such a long-running series, is this one of the entry points that is going to be a new arc, or does this tie in to an existing arc of a couple books?
This is the middle book in a trilogy.
Yeah, it's the third.
Okay.
It's Trader's Leap, Ribbon Dance, and Diviner's Bow. So Leap, Dance, Bow.
Okay. So because this is Bane, a lot of even their sequels can stand alone. So almost, do you need to have read any of the other books to understand this one? Would you recommend hopping back to the book before this?
I'm a bad person to ask because I read series out of order all the time, and I'm not bothered by it. This one you can probably read by itself if you're not offended by magic.
No, I am the weird guy that has to do like the completionist. It took me a long time to accept that if I didn't like a book, I could put it down and not finish the series. There's life's too short to read bad books is kind of my new mantra. But yeah, so and that's when some of these long running series kind of almost can be a little scary sometimes because it's like, the price of books these days that can get a little pricey. I got addicted to one and I ended up dropping $100 to get the next 10 in the series. So I'm, sometimes it's nice to know you could get in a little bit later in various books.
Yeah, but you're Mr. Audiobook, which does bring up, it looks like we've got audio for almost everything here.
Except for Ribbon Dance.
Yeah, it says coming soon. So I see a cover that says coming soon for this, but looks like most of the series has really solid audio. So even JR can read.
There you
go. So do you have a favorite character in this book?
In this book? Oh.
It's a deep world, so if I ask you for the universe, we might be here all night.
Unfair. I like the Death Counselor.
Okay.
There are, as I started to tell you, there are three kinds of people on Colomino. There are the civilized who have to live under the grid, the Heyosa who live off of the grid, and the deaf, to whom all of this is nothing. They can't levitate, they can't see. They can see the ribbons because that's physical, but none of the rest of the stuff has anything to do with them. They are basic. They're just normal people.
Yeah.
Caught in this crazy ambient thing, and Major Zeogorn, who is the Deaf Counselor, is a real joy. He's smart. He's got a whole lot of common sense. He refuses to be disabled because he can't do any of the normal things that the rest of the people can do. And he is the second deaf counselor who has been allowed on the Council of Civilization. He's fighting for his people's right to be equal and to determine their own lives and not be dependent on having gifted mentors protecting them, being allowed to make their own mistakes.
I love that.
Always solid themes. That's one of the things when I was going through Walter Reed after I got hurt in Iraq. That was one of the things they told us is like, you can, be somebody that has this injury, or you can be the injury. And one way leads to happiness and the other way leads to madness. Mm-hmm. So I always appreciate the message is, that bad stuff happened to you, but you don't have to let that define you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a positive message. That's one of the things that makes, I think, speculative fiction so beautiful is that it can give you these messages without preaching in your face. Like you're on
the value of fun for changing
Absolutely.
changing people's perspective is really underrated. I mean, we give all these awards to downer books and movies when fun is how it's the sugar on the lesson.
So who is the protagonist of this novel? Can you talk about it without spoilers? Because we obviously want people to read your books.
Mm-hmm. I can talk about Patty, but would you like me to tell you? She's a trader. She's just gotten her ring, which means she's a full trader now. But she's still traveling with her master trader, her father, to whom she was apprenticed to finish her coursework, so to speak. And they're opening Colomino. They're trying to decide if they can open Colomino as a trade hub. because Clan Corval, Tree and Dragon family, has recently fallen into a scrape which has gotten them thrown off of their home world, and they need money. So Sean and the Dutiful Passage have to find new trade routes because a lot of their former trade partners had dropped them like hot potatoes, not wanting to partake of their trouble.
Oh, there's another good thing.
And Patty enters the book feeling that her gifts are a burden. She's only ever wanted to be a trader. She doesn't want to be a healer. She doesn't want to be talented. She just, wants it all to go away. And in this book, she meets people who rejoice in their gifts and who are gifted and also do other things. It's not either or. There are many paths to becoming a full person. And like so many Liaden books, this is a found family book also. She finds people who are simpatico and people that she can help and people who help her.
Which is like one of my very, very favorite tropes is that found family is a happy thing. So I do have another question before JR lets you go. I know we're right at the top of the hour, but I was both browsing your page and I'm doing the virtual panels at Balticon this year. And rumor has it that you are getting the Robert A. Heinlein Award there.
That's true, I am.
So can you speak to that just a little bit? So let me read you the brief on it that I'm pulling right from your page, because it's really impressive. And this is a fun award. And I love that they do it at Balticon, and that's like your home con. The Robert A. Heinlein Award. The award is bestowed for outstanding published works in science fiction and technical writings that inspire the human exploration of space. The award will be formally presented during opening ceremonies on Friday, May 23rd, 2025. So if you're in the Baltimore area or you like virtual cons, come and join Balticon because it's really cool.
Balticon, absolutely. Balticon's a wonderful con.
Balticon 59. It's the Maryland Regional Science Fiction Fantasy Convention. Then there's all this other information. So when did you find out you were getting that? Because I've heard of this several times, and it's a pretty, you are not getting it for being dark and dank. This is for, these wonderful space stories. So how did that all come about? And then we'll let you go.
I don't know how it came. I actually don't know how it came about. The end of March, I got a note from one of my readers who is in the Baltimore area and active in BISFIS, the Baltimore Science Fiction Society, and she said the chairman of BISFIS would like your phone number. Is it okay if I give it to him? He promises it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And he said, okay, give him my phone number. So she did that, and he called and he informed me that the Heinlein Award, and he said, but it's not the one where you get $50,000. There being several Heinlein Awards.
Yes,
it's a big difference.
This one you get, I think it's a medallion, 2 pins, and a plaque, and all the biscuits you can eat for a weekend. And for the Liaden, I don't know how they choose. It's a committee. And apparently the Liaden Universe has inspired people to want to go to outer space because you meet lots of cool people and Norbears. So now you know what I know.
Love it. I think it's well-deserved. And dear listeners, if you go to her homepage, she has a very delightful blog. It's at Sharon Lee Writer. And I'm sure that we're going to go in the end notes. Sorry, JR. I'm jumping ahead here. But they've got all sorts of cool awards, and like I say, as a reader, very, very well earned. So we want you to read all of her books and make her very, very happy. We command it. This we command.
Thank you.
All right, JR.
No, you're absolutely okay. So one of the things we should probably do, because we've done some of the other cons, maybe we can get some of the people from Balticon to come on in, because that's still a relatively small as far as they don't try to compete with Comic-Con in size.
Oh no, it's a regional con. It's a con like the old time.
One of my favorite writers talks about he went there all the time until recently. Terry Mixon used to go, and so I'd hear him and Paul talk about it on their podcast. So it's one of those things where I've heard about it tangentially. So it's kind of cool to hear you're getting the award there. At least I'm like, I've heard of that one.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and they do a virtual version. So for folks who don't want to travel to Baltimore or can't afford it this year, they do have a virtual version, and they have some panels that are only virtual. So you can see people there that you might not see elsewhere. They broadcast a lot of their panels to the virtual con, and it's way inexpensive. I want to say it's like $25. It might be a little bit more than that. So don't quote me on that. But it's a very, very affordable kind of con. And I've been doing virtual stuff for them for 3 years, and they are just absolutely delightful. So I loved seeing that connection between you and Balticon.
That is kind of cool because I don't do crowds very well with PTSD. So now that some of these cons are going virtual where you can get some of those panels, that's just amazing because, I'm sure there are other people that for whatever health reasons just can't get out. And I like that they're not isolated from those experiences because some of those panel chats are fun.
Yeah, Albacon also is fully virtual, virtual and in person. So, and that's in October. Yeah.
I'll have to reach out to all three of those because I know DragonCon is doing more this year as well as far as the virtual, and I will see if we can't get them to pimp their stuff so our audience knows how to do that. This is the part of the introduction, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book, so do your part, people. That really does matter. Even authors who are on their 100th millionth book, they still like the reviews. They help. Share it with a friend. All of it matters. Check out our website where you can see what our catalog is. You can get some of them for free over there at Bane's Free Library, which we will link to. But as we wrap this up, Sharon, how can listeners find you if they want to engage with you as a creator?
If they actually want to talk to me, they should come to my Facebook page, which I'm Rolani on Facebook. If they just want to look at pictures of the coon cat, as who does not, and see what my thoughts are before I'm fully caffeinated, they can go to SharonLeeWriter.com and hit blog without a name and read the blog entry. Those are the two best ways. www.corval.com is basically news. So if you just want what's being published, the Liaden Universe won an award, what's coming out next, so that would be your source for that.
So is the Liaden Universe just you and your husband, or have you let other authors play in that sandbox?
It was just us.
Okay. And I did look up, it looks like in August, dear listener, so you'll be listening to this in May, it'll be airing in August, should be the audiobook link for Ribbon Dance, assuming, but all of us are bottlenecked at the altar of Audible sometimes when it comes to audiobooks. And there's just no rhyme or reasons. I've heard some authors talk about a book and 6 months later, they finally got through the whatever digital bottleneck was going on. So that is unfortunately outside of most people's hands. I think they have a monkey in a back room somewhere running their code.
Either something like that, or you're just throwing things at a dartboard.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah, well, because sometimes on the flip side of that 6 months, I've had people, they're like, oh yeah, I put it up and I got it within just a couple of weeks. I'm like, how, what goat did you sacrifice? Because the rest of us would like to know how.
It's one of those ones where you see that the meme of that evangelical preacher, and it's like, Lord, I see what you're doing for those people, and I want some of it. I feel that when people talk about their easy access to uploading Audible. Sometimes they're like, oh, this isn't good enough quality on the audio production. Re-upload it. I'm like, okay, I'm uploading the same file, and now it's okay? I don't understand.
It's magic.
So, Jana, since you were nice enough to sit in as guest host for us today, can you tell the listeners how they might find you? And I will link to that in the show notes as well.
Oh, fantastic. You can find me over at opalkingdompress.com. That is where me and the other versions of me all hang out. I have 2 open calls for the press for anthologies. So let's see, this is going out in May. You'll just miss the cutoff on Phoenix Stories, but Griffin's just opened, and that is open until July 31st. So if you are a upcoming writer, as well as being a geek about being a reader and a partaker of all things science fiction and fantasy and otherwise, come on over and write a story for me, because I would love to hear from you.
All right. And you can follow us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters. We've got our Spotify, our Discord. Come join us over there. The water's warm, people. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have an email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, Blasters and Blades Podcast @gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Madam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section, this is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it pours out of their eyeballs, people, and then they'll swim away in a river of Java goodness. If you want some of that coffee for yourself, you can go to the link in the show notes for Coffee Brand Coffee. Use the code Podcast Grunts. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of kickback. It's a win-win, people. It really does help. And as Jana likes to remind us, they also have amazing hot chocolate.
Thank you.
It's her jam. And with that, I will remind you, because she didn't say it, and I just realized, because it's in the show notes, if you want to tip authors you like, if you read her books and you absolutely want to throw some shekels her way, she has a Ko-Fi, which is similar to Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, contribute directly to an author you like. So it's if you're digging what she's laying down and you enjoyed the free books that Bain is offering, you can go give her a tip over there on Ko-Fi, and that will be linked in the show notes as well. And with that, we would like to thank.
And that's Sharon, she, not me, she.
Yes.
Just to make perfectly clear, because you just talked about me, and now, and this is my inner editor coming in to say, the last time that you used the pronoun, you didn't then use a name so that they knew which one of us you're talking about. One of these days, I'll get one of those neat Ko-Fi things, but I don't have one yet. So to give Sharon all of the pennies that she is due, go and visit her Ko-Fi link. We'll have that in the show notes.
Okay, you can give her a break. It's after 10 o'clock.
She edits me too, and I get all of this directly as well. It can be brutal. But with that, I'd like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my absentee and crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time. We'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thank you for coming on, Sharon. This is fun, and we're definitely inviting you back for the speculative fiction panel we discussed earlier.
Perfect.
With that, we're going to hit the end button.